the Ford Fusion SE retails at $23,700 and gets an average of 28 mpg. So that mpg in the problem, that's miles per gallon. So let's make sure we know what that means. Miles per gallon of gas. So basically on 1 gallon of gas, this car could drive 28 miles. The Ford Fusion SE Hybrid retails at $27,200 and gets an average of 47 miles per gallon. So you're paying more for the car, but less for the gas to drive the car. So we have two questions here. How many more miles would the hybrid travel on 12 gallons of gas? And how many fewer gallons would the hybrid require to travel 400 miles? Well, nowhere in part A or B does it mention anything about money, about dollar values. So we have some extraneous information that's not relevant to the problem. So I'm going to go ahead off the bat and cross those numbers out because we're not going to use the price of either car. We're looking at miles and gallons, and that's it. So part A and part B are similar questions. If you look at the first 4 words, how many more miles and how many fewer gallons? Anytime you're comparing two things and saying, how much bigger is this thing than that thing? Or how much smaller is this thing than that thing? Anytime you're comparing two amounts, it's always going to be a situation where we subtract. Okay, so it looks like in both of these problems, we're going to have to subtract two things. Okay, so now let's focus just on part A. How many more miles would the hybrid travel on 12 gallons of gas? Okay, so we're comparing two things. We're comparing the regular Fusion and the hybrid Fusion. So let's look at each of those two cars separately and how many miles they could travel. So, okay, so let's look at one, the Fusion. And then 2, we'll look at the Fusion Hybrid. Now, the Fusion, the regular Fusion in the problem is saying it gets 28 miles per gallon. So that's 28 miles for each gallon. So in this case, the word per is telling us to multiply the number of miles, which is 28, times the number of gallons. So because basically the first gallon gets you 28 miles. The second gallon gets you another 28. The third gallon gets you another 28. So you're doing 28 miles 12 times because you have 12 gallons. Okay, so we'll do 28 times 12, and that's a total of 336 miles. And now the Fusion Hybrid, well, that's getting 47 miles per gallon. So we're going to multiply the 47 again times the 12 because you're getting 47 for the first, another 47 for the second, and so on and so on. So on the same amount of gas, the hybrid will travel 564 miles. And these are not the final answers, but I'm just going to put a box around each one of these numbers because these are the two things we have to subtract. How many more does the hybrid get than the regular Fusion? So we'll do 564 minus the 336, and that will give us a total of, or a difference of, I should say, 228 more miles. And in part B, a similar problem, like I said, how many fewer gallons? So we're comparing, in part A, we were comparing the amount of miles each car could drive. In part B, we're comparing the amount of gas it will take to travel 400 miles. Okay, so we're taking the 400, which is the total amount, and we saw this in problem 3. We saw this again in problem 4. We're taking that 400 miles, that one big thing, and we're splitting it up into smaller things. In this case, if we're looking at the regular fusion, how many gallons will it take? Well, one gallon goes 28 miles. 1 gallon equals 28 miles. That's what's given in the problem. So we're saying how many 28s are there in 400? So we'll do 400, the large amount, and we're dividing this by 28. So it's 400 miles divided by 28 miles per gallon. And that will give us, now I know the directions say round to the nearest tenth, but that's the final answer. We're going to round to the nearest tenth. So don't forget we're rounding here, round to the nearest tenth of a gallon. If you're rounding before you get to the final answer, I always say keep a couple extra decimal places so it doesn't affect your answer. Okay, so I'm going to round this, according to the calculator, I'm going to round this to 3 places, and that's 14.285 gallons. So for the fusion to drive 400 miles, you would have to buy a little over 14 gallons of gas. Then, put that up here. Then we have the fusion hybrid. And the fusion hybrid, well, we have 1 gallon is equal to 47 miles. So again, we'll do 400 divided by 47. And if we pop that into the calculator, we get 8.511. So to drive the same amount of miles, same number of miles, you have to purchase significantly less gas, only about 8.5 gallons. So we're going to do the same thing we did above. So let me write gallons here. We're going to take the number of gallons for the fusion, the number of gallons for the fusion hybrid, and those two numbers we're going to subtract. The 14,285, and let me put a little bit more space in here. We're going to do 14.285, and we're going to subtract the 8.511, and that will give us a total difference of 5.774. And now, this is where I'm going to round to the nearest tenth. I use some extra decimal places just to be safe, and so my final answer would be 5.8 fewer gallons. 5.774, if we round that to 1 decimal place, we'll have 5.8. All right, and that should do it for this problem.